Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this show. And first thing I want to say, like always, just thank you for being here. I know that if I didn't have this to force myself to articulate every week what it is I'm trying to do in my quest to become a better player, I know that I wouldn't be able to hold the line, right? And chess is weird because, let's say you're training for running or whatever, you can hold yourself to the line by saying, all right, we're going to hold this training regimen. Whereas with chess, you're trying to learn things and it's not entirely clear what you should learn, right? There's just this ocean of stuff that's available to you. And that makes it difficult. Now, speaking of difficulty, I thought I'd start off with a little story. So, some of you might know I wrote a chess novel years ago, 2013. I spent a lot of time doing it, a lot of effort. Pretty happy with it most of all. Most people liked it. And one of the things about it that I didn't know from when I wrote it was that there would be some very interesting reviews of the book. And I feel, partly because I threw myself into it, that when I read a review, I often get an interesting reflection of that person relating with what I wrote. And so the most recent review was this kid, I'm going to call him a kid, he's probably like, I don't know, 18, 19, Elijah Logozar. Probably, he's not an IM yet or anything, but he'll probably be up there. He's really pushing it with doing Puzzle Rush. They're doing Puzzle Grind with Kostian stuff. They're seeing like if their chess improves by doing 3,000 back rank mates like really quickly or something like that, right? So anyways, he read my book and complained a little bit that it was too depressing. It wasn't the inspirational tale that he had hoped for. And while that's a little humorous for me, I thought it was an interesting take on it. And what it made me realize too is that, at least with this show, I am not interested in sugarcoating anything. I don't want to be some inspirational dude. Yes, I want to tell you that I'm making progress, but at the same time, I know that it's not going to be easy, that I'm going to have cognitive decline, that my body's going to be falling apart, and that I'll have other life challenges as well. I've simply recognized from the beginning that that's part of the problem. That's going to be like part of the challenge is that whole backdrop. And I think for anybody, especially people trying to improve as, elders, that is going to be part of the challenge. In fact, if we didn't have all these other things going on, then it wouldn't be so interesting. Though, of course, it's beautiful to be young like Elijah and have the time and resources to do chess and maybe have a family situation where you don't have to think too much about money. In any case, to that end, when I first started this show, I spoke at length about like my fitness and stuff, and then when the COVID thing happened, my fitness really went down. I have a feeling it's similar to a lot of other people, and it was just a lot of it was time and stress. Like it was hard to sleep. The kids were screaming all the time. They couldn't go to daycare, and now the last couple weeks, finally, I've got it back. So like my weight just went through the roof, man. Like the stress and not sleeping and stuff, like that took its toll on my body. And only now am I kind of getting it under control. And it helped me realize that basic things like stress levels and time are what's needed to be healthy. And without that backdrop, I don't think I could make progress anyway. Maybe I'm not going to make progress in any case, but I know that without, kind of a stable life where I have some time to think about stuff is very critical. And also just for me spiritually, I don't want to be that person who doesn't have any time in their life. So, let me just say, with the fitness, it's still a long road. The only good news I have is that let's put it this way. Last fall, I was in St. Louis, and even though my fitness over the last ever since moving to Baltimore and having the kids and stuff has been terrible. But in St. Louis in the fall, I was doing a pretty fast mile, and I did 50 push-ups for the first time since forever. And yesterday, even though my weight is still terrible, I got to 46. And interestingly, I think you can do strength stuff whilst being overweight, even though it's a body weight exercise. Whereas the mile, dude, I'm just like really slow, really slow. Anyways, those are just some of the benchmarks, and especially now, I'm just trying to. I realize too with the fitness. I know I've said this before, but without some kind of concrete goal, it's not interesting to me, and I don't make any progress. And I think one of the bummers now with chess is, since I don't get to play, it's harder to have, the goal was of course 2,500, and that's been a difficult thing for me to stay on focus, and that's why this show has actually been really great. So I've talked a lot of trash about playing Blitz, but the last 3 weeks I think, I play Title Tuesday, and it's just a fun way for me to be a little bit competitive, again, even though I'm not great at Blitz. I realize it is something you can get better at, and all these guys online, these kids, they're really pushing it with the Blitz now. There's like IMs and FMs that I played on Tuesday, just yesterday, that, were clearly just amazing Blitz players. And I'm not really, I don't want to train for Blitz. It's not something I want to do, but I do just want to have fun with it once in a while. Anyways, I bring that all up because today I want to talk about Yasser. And there is one thing that only I realize as a much older person is it's good to have a Blitz repertoire for two reasons. One, when you're playing online, let's say I'm playing Title Tuesday, all those games people can find. So it's totally dumb for me to play whatever theory it is I'm learning. Then people just see it when I play a real game again, and then it's totally useless, or worse than useless, because then it'll be used against me. So that's one reason to have it. And it's also, I feel like with the Blitz, you can get away with positions that are normally not what you want, in particular positions where you lack space. And so one cool thing that I'm developing, who also could be used for normal play, is what I'm calling an endgame repertoire for black, and really to do d6, e5 at all moments, and go into that endgame, which is very playable for black. And of course white doesn't have to do it, and then we can get either a Philidor or an old Indian, and we just get this maneuvering game where, especially in Blitz, white's advantage is a space advantage, and it's very difficult to use that space advantage in a Blitz game. It's actually difficult in a normal game as well, but in a Blitz game it's especially difficult to use the space advantage. So that was what I was doing yesterday. It was kind of fun. And so anyways, I scored like +2, and maybe I'll dream about doing better with Title Tuesday or something until normal tournaments happen. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because today I'm going to look at 4 positions where I feel like I learned something. These are all from Seirawan's Chess Duels book that GM Eugene Perelstein recommended to me while I was in St. Louis last year. And it's just now I'm kind of getting around to it after doing the Nikitin books, which I just reviewed on YouTube. You can check that out. Anyways, so these are 4 positions where, like, looking at the games, I feel like I got turned on to something. Last week I talked a little bit about Seirawan and his own chess values, which are different from mine in an interesting way. In any case, so like I said, I feel like black, especially in this position, especially in this one, gets a great ending if white takes. In fact, there's a fascinating positional death that white can fall into in this position where, honestly, I think he's close to lost. No, I don't want to put it that way. He's worse, even though he's better developed, because both of the knights are completely dominated. Well, okay, Now, back in the day, back in the 80s, f4 is kind of seen as the way to hurt black, even now. And the idea is that black really wants that c7 square, and we want to take it away from him. In the Gelfand book, there's a great game that Gelfand plays, I think in one of those old Soviet simols, against Petrosian, and Petrosian knocks him out in a mildly similar endgame. And the point is that there's many ways that this ending can be reached, and there's some very interesting details that can arise. And this one I found totally fascinating, where here, first of all, Seirawan thought he was better. I'm not really sure that he's better in this position, but black's next move, c6, hard for me to imagine that this thing is wrong. But it turns out, in fact, black is in a little bit of trouble here just because of the inclusion of g3 and g6, which is not immediately obvious to me at all. But we'll see that the bishop now might have chances on h3, whereas, you know, if he just goes to g2, it's going to be poor. And also, in a surprising way, the f6 square is a problem, and even later we're going to see this diagonal. So this is Seirawan Karpov 1990, one of Seirawan's best games, I think, even though, well, he kind of blows it in the middle of it, and I'm not going to talk too much about that. But this next sequence, really beautiful, and interesting that he kind of understood this, that this was already a bad news for black, and that really black needs to wait until white plays bishop g2 and only then play c6. So let's look. I thought this was very interesting that black is in fact already in trouble. So f4, and here in my own personal analysis, I do it always without the computer. I thought knight d7, black was okay, but it's not really true. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that when you play c6, you're hoping to dominate this knight, but at many points, this knight's actually going to go to e4. So it's not as dead as it looks. And these squares now being opened up aren't a help for black. So Karpov thinks forever and does a Seirawan thing, honestly. A Seirawan thing, which is to take a pawn. I'm going to show one example where he takes a pawn. I'm just like, what are you doing, bro? In any case, yeah, I thought this was really interesting. So taking the pawn's scary, but it wasn't immediately clear to me that black is already in deep, deep trouble. So bishop h3, f5, b3 exclam, and the point is, look at this. And so e4 exclam, very nice, to open up that bishop. You got to take, and the game is basically over. Now, Seirawan does manage to blow it, and it goes to an equal game, but the story, you know, is as not surprising, black is in time pressure because he had to figure out all of that drama here. In any case, I thought that was a beautiful thing where just one detail in the position turned it into a position where I think of it as very acceptable for black, to one here where just one little difference, and especially after c6 here, which turns out c6 immediately is a mistake, that one difference, you know, is drastically altering the evaluation of the position. Yeah. So maybe I'll just say a little story. So 1987, it was like the U.S. Junior High Championship. It was like K through 9 or something like that. And I won that tournament. It was like in L.A. or something. And Seirawan came in, and I remember he was this really like good-looking, extroverted dude. You know, most chess players are not extroverts, and back then, you know, it's just really interesting to see this guy. And he just came and he showed some positions and stuff. And I think he even managed to complain to the organizers within earshot of everybody that he wasn't getting paid enough. That was his big thing. He was always complaining he wasn't getting paid enough. And I'm sure back then it was hard, back in the 80s, even as definitely, I think, the nation's number one player through the 80s, that he was having such a hard time of it. Anyways, so fast forward, and my own life did all kinds of various things, and I was an academic for a long time. I was studying, and I did my doctorate in Germany, yada yada. And I come back to the States. I'm teaching at this college, and the dream of once you start teaching college, it's not the dream of academia is not what it really was anymore. Anyways, and so right around that time, like early 2000s, Seirawan and Yvette Noggle, his wife, start organizing this new U.S. championship. It was in Seattle then, where Yasser's from, and he got some money, some organizers, and that was called. I think it was originally called the Seattle Foundation for Chess, later America's Foundation for Chess. Anyways, it was this beautiful tournament, and you had to qualify for it. And, it was such a beautiful aspiration that was one of the key things that got me playing seriously and got me thinking about, like, oh, I want to do this quixotic dream of becoming a GM. Just the idea of like I could play in the U.S. Championship. I qualified that first time. Really a beautiful experience in Seattle, and I played Yasser. He was beating me, and I somehow drew the game. But anyways, maybe someday I'll look at that game on the show. And I just wanted to bring that story up because that was my personal relationship to Yasser. Yasser also, of course, in the 80s was like the only player really competing, U.S. player competing at the top. It's hard to imagine now because we got such a strong team. And we had several good players like Benjamin and Christensen, but they weren't competing against, say, Kasparov and Karpov. And one of the amazing things about this book, Chess Duels, is turning me on to like, oh, I knew he had a good record against Tal, but I didn't really understand that he was holding his own against Kasparov and Karpov back in the day. Okay, so I'm going to show a couple more positions where I felt like I learned something. So this is a game against Spassky. Basically, the theme of the book is all of his games against the world champions. And a4, a strange move. b6, kind of strange. And now bishop b7, a little bit asking for it. And one thing about Yasser's play that maybe as a kid, he even infected me. And he continues to infect American players and fans who watch his broadcasts and stuff, is the ardent materialism. That's what I'm going to call it. Ardent materialism that he's always about. And here he's going to go pawn hunting in ways that I'm just like, bro, what are you doing? But that isn't actually what I learned. And I'll get to the point where I feel like I learned something. So e5, knight e4. By the way, just like a normal person here, after bishop c4 would play e6, and black is, I think, fine. The white doesn't know where his king's going. He's fine. Now you're really asking for it. Knight e4, snip, snip. Spassky goes all in. And already I think he had dreamed of this position, Seirawan, and he takes this frickin' pawn. Are you out of your mind, bro? Are you out of your mind? You're going to take that thing and then allow this to happen? And now white's got all of his dudes. All of his dudes are in. And, well, let's say the rook on a1 isn't in yet, but it's coming soon. And black is undeveloped. The problems are numerous. So, so this is the Seirawan, I don't know, you can make fun of, or the cartoon Seirawan, or whatever you want to call it, where the guy is, he's taking the pawn, man. He's taking the pawn in a really ridiculous way. Anyways, so here we go. I'm going to get to the point where I feel like I learned something. This is a move Spassky played. So e6, castles, and again, Seirawan's kind of asking for it and probably should play queen e7. Now, interestingly, I think when you play queen e7, you're kind of just admitting that things have gone wrong, because white can play f4, he can play h4, h5, and knight d7 is the move which claims like, oh, I'm better. And in fact, in the notes, it's really amazing. It's clear that Seirawan thought he was better. And that's what I love about, even kind of now, he hasn't relinquished the ghost that maybe he was okay in this position, whereas to me it just looks like absolutely terrible. And that's what I love about pre-computer annotations, because I feel like they're honest in a way that the computer annotations aren't. Not that you're being dishonest when you use the computer, but just you aren't going to be able to think about the position with a clear eye once you turn the computer on, because you're going to change your mind, right, once you see something. What book are we speaking on? We're speaking about Chess Duels here. Chess Duels by Seirawan. I got turned on to this, as I said before, by Eugene Perelstein. Okay, so here's the position which I think Spassky made a really interesting decision. And Seirawan doesn't talk too much about it, but I think it's like the difference in level between a dude like myself and Spassky. So in this position, Spassky plays h4 and just says, I'm going to mate you, bro. I'm going to mate you. And what's interesting to me about it is, you know, if that was the only option, well then, okay, of course we'll play h4. But the other thing that was going on, the other chance here, was knight f7, rook f7, queen e6, and now either queen e8 or queen f8. Let's say this one. And then let's say we snip. And then d5, we're threatening e6. Okay. Bishop d5, rook d5, knight e5. My sense is that variation is mostly forced. Maybe it wasn't, but that's my sense of it. And so we get this position where white is up the exchange, and in particular has hopes, I think, of playing f4, f5 to further open lines on the black king. And like I said, I think most weak GMs like myself would go in for this, and maybe I'll ask the computer, but my sense is clear advantage. Let's see what it, but it's an Armenian position. What I mean by that is like the exchange sacrifice is real, in that black has this nut on e5, and we do have to open the position. Okay, let me just see what, I'll ask the computer. Right, the computer says 1.1. Okay, easy, right? That's what I think most people would say. So that's just like this easy, safe decision that you can make, that Spassky can make here. And instead, he plays h4. It was really fascinating to me because, you know, h4 is a move which says, Seirawan, buddy, you've broken the laws of chess, and now it's time for you to go down. It's over for you, buddy. It's over. But it's over in a way that I don't think, you know, I don't think Spassky can calculate it all out or anything, right? I don't think he knows exactly how this is going to all go down. It's just that he believes in the position, especially with all of white's pieces being so active. So, let's watch the finish of the game. Takes, queen e7, snip, thank you very much, h5. Again, a position you just got to believe in. You got to say the force count is too overwhelming here. And interestingly, Seirawan really thought up until this point in the game that he was like in it. It's really kind of hilarious. When I look at it, I'm like, bro, what happened here? What happened to your king? And he gives a pretty cool, he does give a cool variation with bishop e5, knight h7, queen b4, here, and then h6. My guess is there's probably another way for white too. In any case, that's a cool variation. And if he doesn't have bishop e5, he's of course suffering. So he tries f5. Queen h3, thank you very much. f4, snip, bishop e5, knight e6. Man, it's a rough world. It's a rough world, and you're going to get spanked like this, man. Snip, snip, and yeah, if king h8, just rook h1, snip, and then he resigned. Rook g8. If king h8, rook g8, game's totally over. So I thought h4, was a very instructive, powerful move where you've got to just be believing in this position. Actually, I wasn't thinking about it when I was studying this, but the game Zhang and Fedoseev that me and Kostya were doing commentary on, mildly similar, where Zhang couldn't have seen all the variations, and I thought at one point he was even worse, and he came on our show afterwards and we interviewed him, and he was like, I thought it was winning. And interestingly, I pointed out some variation that I just thought black would be okay, and he couldn't find an answer, but then we had a different GM on later, I think it was Liam, and he found a way for white to win. So it was like his intuition was correct, as this one here with h4. And like I said, if you didn't, I'm sure he saw that variation with knight f7. I'm sure Spassky did. And if you didn't have that variation, then of course you just play h4 and you're all in anyway on the attack. But you do have the choice, right? And that's what makes h4 such an interesting decision. Basically saying that the game is going to be over with h4 in contrast to the clear advantage after knight takes f7. Okay, let me show you another position. Would h5 change anything? I really kind of doubt it, and the main reason is we will take on e6 next move, and it's going to be the death. We're coming here next move, no matter what, and then we slam down that one. So I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's really over. Yeah, you can imagine snip, snip, check to the miserable king, check, game over. Okay, so let's return to Karpov here. And this was a game where Yasser was playing the Petrov against Karpov. And, in a funny way, Yasser played so many different openings. I really feel like he played a great Caro-Kann. He really did. But played the French as well, Perk, and this thing I don't think too often. Anyways, we get this position, and let me just say, like a lot of these Petrov positions, it's oftentimes hard for me to know why white is better. So, for example, in this position, you could tell a story about the knight on c6 being dominated by the pawn on c3. But this pawn on f4 is going to be there. It's going to mess with my bishop. And right, it's not totally clear to me that white's much better. I'm sure there's other moves besides queen a4. And maybe white should play bishop c1 so then I can go back to d2. But okay, we're going to get this position. And at some levels, it feels like, I think most of us actually, we get a position like this and we're like, okay, maybe the computer might tell you you're better. But I'm sure most of you, at least speaking for myself, have the experience that these things, especially when you review your own games, like multiple mistakes will happen from both sides. So it's hard for me to grasp the beauty of what follows here. So rook b5, bishop e8, queen c2, a6. Okay, so white's next move, I want to say there's a conception that white has that he follows through on in the next several moves that I'm going to try to remember, and I don't know, it's even kind of hard to put into words. But notice, let's just look at it, and maybe we'll come back to it. This again. I'm just trying to synthesize what I feel like I learned over the last week. So, and this was definitely one of these positions. So, rook f5, rook takes, queen takes, bishop g6. Again, if I'm just looking at this, do I really believe white has some big advantage? It's hard to say. Queen g4, queen f6. Okay. Bishop c4, rook f8. Now, in this position, you could say to yourself, maybe white has an advantage because of the rook on e1 controlling the e file, right? Maybe I'm threatening things like rook e6. But on the other hand, your pawn structure is split. The pawn on a4 might drop off the board. And what's really sad about the position is the bishop on d2 is really pretty locked in. So that's the drama that white has. And that would, I wouldn't, hard to totally evaluate. Now, a4, okay, that makes sense to me. What does Yasser do? He goes trying to grab a pawn. Now, it's not, whilst that wouldn't be my first instinct, the pawn grubber that he is, I don't really know. It's very hard for me to understand this position in terms of what's going on. I would think maybe h6 would be my first instinct, but then you got to worry about rook e6. So that's actually part of the interesting drama, is that you'd like to play h6, but you can't. So let's look at what happens. Bishop c2, queen h5, okay. H6, all seemingly normal. And I think white has more than one move here. But the next move, somehow for Karpov, in his mind, feels the same as the rook f5 move. I'm sure there's other moves for white here, but Karpov here plays rook e8. And this is pretty next level, honestly, I think. So first let's do a little bit of tactics. So I think the idea is bishop g6, we can take, and then there's queen d5, and we're looking at g8. So in general, that g8 square is a big part of it. And what's controversial or weird about rook e8 is it feels like, oh, well, that was like his one trump in the position was his rook, and now he's going to trade it off. And the point, if I'm going to try to put in words, is black has some grief with his king and the pawn. So by getting rid of the rook, we're going to try to hit both the king and the pawn. Really interesting. So the first point you should see is if bishop a4 with this dirty pawn grubbing stuff, no way, because of rook e6, and then let's say this one, snap, and is this all over? Did I get this wrong? Wait a second. I better make sure. I thought that was over, and now I'm second guessing myself. What have I done? Queen takes, knight h4. These things are hard for me. It's hard for me to totally, make them work. But here he's really in grief because of the light squares and, like we said, the king. So that was like a deeper tactic involved with rook e8. It's even hard for me to what's going on here? Okay. So bishop f5, Yasser goes back. And in a way, he's just sitting, right? Bishop d5. Snip, queen takes, knight h4, bishop e8, queen e2. And I guess the main problem here is that it's going to be hard for black not to trade off his light square bishop. And then we're going to get this position. Again, one where I don't know if I would tell myself, oh, I'm winning. I definitely believe white is firmly better here, but like the extent of the damage, not yet clear to me. But I think that it's actually, in hindsight, we're talking about things I learned, it's lost. The f4 pawn will be hard and most hard to defend, and most importantly, my king is just better. So let's go a little bit. As might be expected, both players are going to make mistakes, and h4 unnecessary. I think something like c4 is not only winning because of a variety of tactical ideas, but it's just the right thing you want to be doing with opening the position over there. Anyways, all this drama happens, and he actually does a really beautiful thing here by doing this, and queen g3. This is maybe winning still, but the true champion's move would have been just keeping the queen on the board with the intention of playing d5 and coming after the king in this amazing like double bishop death to the king kind of thing that of course is really hard to even imagine in time pressure. Though queen g3 I think probably also winning. And I'm not going to go into that. I just wanted, and I still don't think I've put my words to it, but in this position, let's call it from right here with a6, it's not clear to me what white is doing. These positions are pretty opaque to me in general. But I guess what's going to happen with the exchange of both rooks is we're going to go at, by trading off both rooks, we're going to go after the f-pawn and ultimately the king. And the f-pawn, curiously, is in the way of the bishop hitting my beautiful pocket. So I always have the pocket. Like I said, these games, all four that I'm showing, were difficult for me to understand. And that move too, rook e8, that one especially, I wouldn't even be crossing my mind. But I guess it makes a little bit of sense to me in that we're going after the light squares eventually, and the king and the f-pawn. Really pretty tough. Okay. So, that's a great Yasser pick. This book, by the way, I'll do a review at some point like I did of the Nikitin books. I feel like one thing it turned me on to is that Yasser is at his best actually in telling little snippets of stories. Not full-length stories like you would want in a book, but little snippets. And he does that so well in the commentary where, you're watching some game, right? And then, you get a little story and then you go on with the game. And that's what it really is, like a collection of stories. If I got anything, it was just a little bit more detail. Well, about a lot of things, honestly. Like I mentioned with my Nikitin review, there's all this stuff in the 80s about chess politics that still resonates today. Like then, the Soviets had influence over FIDE, and now we have like a head Soviet dude, not even a Soviet, but a head Putin guy. He's the head of FIDE, and no one's even blinking an eye about it. And the shenanigans, I don't think they're like as bad as they were from the schism. What was it in with the short match 1994, from like 1994 till the reunification, what was that, 2014 or whatever, when Anand won it back for the good guys. Like that period of tumultuousness in the chess world, in a way it's still there because FIDE's in control, and I guess in my mind it's always going to be corrupt when you have little nations who have a vote and you can pay them off, as the Soviets did back then, and I think Putin now does today. So anyway, let me show you one more position. When I was a kid, I played this variation of the Queen's Gambit Declined, and partly because it was fashionable back then, It's what Kasparov and Karpov played many times in their World Championship matches. And interestingly, it's an example of a kind of position where the computer is now just basically no. You can't do this. You can't be giving black the bishop. And so, like I mentioned in the last show, this predilection for, not predilection for the knight over the bishop, but the willingness to give the knight for the bishop is one of the things that I think characterized Seirawan in particular, and also shows that even though we have the Fischer ending in 1970 with the match with Taimanov, most top players haven't fully processed the power of the bishop yet. And it's weird too, because with the computer, like, it's humans that have told people, or excuse me, humans who have told the computer that the bishop is better, right? And then the computer tells us in all these positions that the bishop is better. And now we have a loop where now most players, because they've studied with the computer, are seeing a position like this and saying at least black is equal. Definitely a joy for black to play. But black's next move is a mistake, I think, and gives white the chance for an advantage. Short and others came up with a very simple c6, and basically black is in no rush, knight d7. And one of the things that this position made me reflect on, as I said, 4 positions where I got something out of, is a funny thing that I said a couple years ago and that have stuck, and that's, you know, other people found it funny and I found it interesting, is just the phrase pawns aren't people. And this position really exemplifies the belief that pawns are people, because you're trying to say that with b4 you're doing this minority attack thing and you think you're really cool because you've got this minority attack, even though, you know, you gave the bishop to get it, right? And black's pieces are fine, right? Black's pieces are fine. So, right, this overweighting of pawn structure was something that killed my chess. And it wasn't just like bad books and stuff, like pawn structure chess and whatever, but it was also, to a certain extent, games like this and variations like this where I was just following in the footsteps of other great players. Okay. So, c5, mistake, mostly because we now get this beautiful rook b1 tempo. Queen a5. In the Kasparov-Karpov matches, as I remember them, bishop c6 and bishop b5 were played. Yeah, and white is a little bit better. Okay, so queen a5, castles exclam. C takes, knight c6, and here's an interesting moment where white is, I think, better, not so much because of the isolated pawn doesn't help black, but the rook on b1 is really messing with the black coordination. And in this position, Seirawan gives this move an exclam, and he is certainly better after this move. But I was thinking about it afterwards, and I'm going to check it with the computer now, but I was saying to myself, okay, I get it. You know, you are saying when he takes here, we'll take this guy, and you don't want to play rook b7 immediately, because then some kind of thing like this is going to happen and black is fine. Okay, that much I get. But think about it. When you play knight b5, you're doing a complicated tactic. We'll give you that, right? Where you're doing this and you're saying this is a worthy position for black, or excuse me, for white. Even though I think this one's, there's some interesting things about this one as well. So if we go back, the obvious thing that struck me was this is terrible. That's obviously terrible. Aren't we just much better, much better after knight f5? You know? You can have the knight. You can have the knight, but my big fat rook is going to land on c3. I'm going to double check this. Actually, I'll just ask the computer right here. Knight f5. Thank you very much. It's also mentioning knight takes d5 as a move. I don't think any human ever even thought about that. I sort of didn't cross my mind. Yeah, knight f5, an advantage. Though not as much as I would have thought. It says only plus 0.3. Okay, I would have said a little higher. Okay. So Vish Chess asks, so this is a minority attack with the intention of fixing the c7 weakness. Right, and Karpov, I think, and this goes a little bit from the notes too, in Karpov's mind, he hasn't equalized yet. So he's accepting after c5 that he's going to be a little bit worse with c5. I had many games back in the day, by the way, where black played some kind of move like knight d7, and then after b5, I wanted to make a claim that I was better because of this fixing of the pawn. Though even here, I think black is mostly fine, especially if you reroute and then put a knight on e4 or something, you're going to be fine. Because pawns aren't people. But yes, Vish, that was the idea. So let me show you the game. I thought it was a pretty interesting finish here. Now, I have a feeling that there were other things to be said in this position where knight e7 seemed to me to be whatever, what do we want to call it? Passive, right? But I was looking in my own business here. There's d4 was a thought, but I was looking at, right, like this stuff. And I wasn't sure that white actually had anything special with like d4 right now. Yeah, it wasn't totally obvious to me that white had anything special. Got a nice thunderstorm going on right now. So knight e7, mistake, and the instructive thing that's going to happen is we're going to get this very interesting bishops of opposite color position where at this point maybe, let's emphasize maybe, white is a little bit better. And you know, I love these bishops of opposite color positions because they are so anti-intuitive, or rather the laws of chess change a little bit. And so if we go on here, that was all mildly forced. g3, everyone criticized it, said king f1, but g3 seems fine to me. And it's here that black really blows it and allows a winning, and well, I think probably a winning position. White is a little bit better though, and part of the problem is now when you move this f-pawn, the light squares are going to be weak. So yeah, this is a very interesting ending. And let's see what the computer says. I'm sure black's next move is a mistake. So he's saying white's not that much better, like f6, small advantage. Okay, but f6, sure, play f6 and accept the fact that you have the weakness. And maybe even if you lose the d-pawn, probably not lost. Anyway, so this terrible thing happened. And ooh la la, the game is like pretty close to nuts here. Bishop a4, very nice. And here, I'm sure it's time pressure. Back in the day, even though we had more time, like 2.5 hours for 40 moves, everybody was always in time pressure. People have become more professional about the time pressure these days. And here, yeah, dude just missed, I think it was like knight f6 as Looney Tunes here. With just a pretty crushing advantage. And bishop goes somewhere, I don't know where we go. And this bishop of opposite color ending, I'm going to say close to 1. Either winning or close to winning, because we're going to be able to attack the f7 point, and black isn't going to have any counterplay on the dark squares. So, anyways, this was one that got away from Seirawan. A couple games, they got away. The maestros got away. This being one of them. And of course, one of the great things about playing those guys is your mistakes are going to be made on both sides, and it's rare that you're going to get crushed like with Spassky. You're going to have to make bad decisions in order for that to happen. And actually, one thing I just had a passing thought on about this Bishop G2 thing. I think Seirawan, when he takes here on G2 and goes for this whole thing, Seirawan, I think you could blame Korchnoi for this because, Seirawan worked with Korchnoi a little bit. But this materialism that has infected a lot of current American players and just people watching his commentary, one idea I just had was you could maybe talk about it being a thing where, like myself and all the other American players, we didn't have a real chess culture. And what I mean by that is a chess culture where taking the pawn is generally a bad thing to do. And, and Spassky, I think, fills that lack of culture with this H4 move, which is just saying, Black, you are toast, dude. You are not going to live through this position. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I got this beautiful skylight over my head. I got the beautiful rain, and with that, I'll end it. I'll post this thing on YouTube if you miss some of it and want to watch more of it. I'll talk to you though next. Oh wait, I might have to make an announcement. Next week is actually different. Next week I'm doing the chess.com game review. So if you want, you can type my name into the search bar on chess.com and you can find there in the forums a forum where you can submit your game for review. And I'll be doing that next Wednesday from 1 to 4 Eastern. That sound right? No, excuse me. 4 to 7 Eastern, 1 to 4 Pacific. All right, till next week. Bye-bye.